You don't realize how desperately you need control until it's gone. For 17 years, my life was a fortress of control. I lived in a city of concrete and right angles, worked a 9 to 5 where my day was dictated by scheduled meetings and color-coded spreadsheets, and came home to an apartment where even the temperature was preset to a perfect 72 degrees. I was Hillary, senior data analyst, and my world made sense. It was predictable. It was safe. It was also suffocating me. That's why I took up survivalism. It started as a hobby, a way to feel a little less like a cog in a machine. I devoured books by grizzled old mountain men, watched hours of shows about guys with beards building shelters out of sticks and mud. I learned 100 ways to start a fire, how to find north using a watch, how to filter water with layers of sand and charcoal. In theory, I was more capable than any of them. I had the knowledge, meticulously cataloged in my brain, cross-referenced and optimized. It made me feel powerful, in control. Then came the promotion. Or rather, the promotion that wasn't mine. I'd been chasing it for 2 years, putting in the 80-hour weeks, swallowing the corporate nonsense, playing the game. They gave it to Mark from accounting. Mark, who couldn't format a spreadsheet to save his life, but knew how to golf with the VP of sales. When my boss, Dave, called me into his glass-walled office, he gave me that fake pity look they teach in management seminars. We just felt Mark was a better fit for the culture of the leadership team, which was corporate speak for, he's one of the boys. I just nodded. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I walked back to my desk, sat down in my ergonomic chair, and felt the walls of my carefully constructed fortress crumble into dust. It wasn't about the money or the title. It was the feeling of being rendered completely, utterly insignificant, powerless. That's when this trip stopped being a hobby. It became a necessity, a pilgrimage. I needed to prove to myself that I was more than a name on a rejected promotion application. I needed to be somewhere real, somewhere where the rules were clear and brutally honest. You are either capable or you are not. There's no office politics in the deep woods. So I planned it with the same obsessive detail I'd use for a quarterly report. Topographical maps, laminated, gearless, cross-checked, meal plans, vacuum sealed. So here I am, 2 days in, maybe 50 kilometers from the nearest paved road, deep in the Kaskaskia National Forest. My camp is perfect, just like in the books. The A-frame tent is secure, pitched on high ground with the door facing east. The fire pit is a model of safety, ringed with stones, a safe distance from any low-hanging branches. My water filter is bubbling away, turning murky creek water into life. Every single thing is exactly where it should be, a perfect little island of order in the heart of the wild. I am capable. I am in control. But as the sun bleeds out behind the jagged line of pines, the forest is changing. The friendly afternoon birdsong has been replaced by an unearning silence. And underneath that silence, there's something else. A sound. No, not a sound. It's a feeling, a low thrum that vibrates up through the soles of my boots. Like the whole world is holding its breath. I try to dismiss it. Distant logging equipment, an underground stream, but it feels wrong. It feels like the feeling of being watched, not by a bear or a coyote, but by something that knows my name. And the most terrifying part, this feeling isn't in any of my books. That feeling,
That deep, resonant thrumming didn't go away. It was a constant, a bass note under the skin of the world, and it was getting stronger. I tried to rationalize it. Low-frequency sound can travel for miles, I told myself, my brain automatically quoting a passage from the SAS Survival Handbook. It was probably just some distant machinery, a train, anything from the world I'd left behind. But my gut, an instinct I didn't know I had, told me I was lying to myself. The source wasn't miles away. It felt close, and it felt alive. That's when the rain started. Not a gentle pitter-patter, but a sudden, cold drizzle that felt less like weather and more like a decision. It soaked the carefully stacked firewood I'd gathered and hissed at the edges of my perfect fire. My little island of control was being washed away. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of my confidence. Okay, don't panic. Adapt and overcome. I pulled my poncho tighter and scanned the darkening woods, my headlamp cutting a nervous slice through the gloom. And then I saw it. A dark opening in a rock face, not 20 meters from my camp. A cave. Dry, dark, and deep. It was a stroke of unbelievable luck, a perfect ready-made shelter. My training kicked in. A cave offers superior protection from the elements, a natural fortress. With a surge of renewed confidence, I grabbed my pack and scrambled towards it, dragging my essential gear into the dry, earthy-smelling darkness. Forget the tent, forget the fire. This was better. I was still in control. I had adapted. I was a survivor. I sat just inside the mouth of the cave, watching the drizzle turn into a torrential downpour. The world outside became a wall of gray noise and blurred green. It was actually cozy. I felt safe, smug even, for my cleverness. I pulled out an energy bar and took a bite, feeling the sweet victory. Let it rain. Let the storm rage. I had outsmarted it. But as the last of the daylight vanished, the sounds of the forest changed. It wasn't the silence from before. This was different. It was a chorus of snapping twigs and rustling leaves, frantic and wrong. It sounded like every small animal in the woods was running, all at once, in every direction. Running from something. My breath hitched in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs. And then, at the edge of the tree line, a shape emerged from the rain. It was too big to be a black bear. Its silhouette was wrong, hulking and broad in a way that defied the natural order. It just stood there, motionless, a black void against the gray storm. I couldn't see its face, couldn't make out any details, but I didn't need to. Every survival instinct I'd ever read about screamed at me in a single, silent word: predator. I shrank back into the cave, my body turning to ice. My meticulously planned trip, my test of self-reliance, had just turned into a terrifying waiting game. The cave wasn't a shelter, it was a trap, and the monster was blocking the door. For what felt like hours, I did nothing. I just sat there in the cold dark, my back pressed against a rock, and watched the shape. I was waiting for it to move on, to lose interest, to do what the book said a wild animal should do. It didn't. It just stood there, an unmoving sentinel in the downpour. My analytical mind, the part of me that color-coded spreadsheets and built fortresses of logic, kicked in to fight the rising tide of panic. It's just a bear, it insisted. Probably a Kodiak, far from its normal territory. Unusual, but not impossible. It doesn't know you're here. Stay quiet. It will lose interest. I clung to that thought like a prayer.
It was my last anchor to the world I understood, the world that followed rules. But the thrumming I'd felt earlier was back, stronger now, radiating through the rock and bone of the cave. And it seemed to be coming from the bear itself. It was a low, guttural vibration that I could feel in my teeth. I slowly, carefully unzipped a pocket on my pack and pulled out my night vision monocular, another piece of expensive, top-of-the-line gear I'd bought to feel prepared. My hands were shaking so badly it took me a few seconds to focus it. I raised it to my eye, the world outside turning a sickly digital green. The creature was still there, its form massive and shaggy. I zoomed in, trying to get a detail, anything to make it make sense. Then a flash of lightning split the sky, and for a terrifying, unforgettable second, the world outside was brighter than day. The monocular flared, blinding me, but not before the image was burned into my retinas. The creature's fur was matted and black, slicked with rain like crude oil. Its head was massive, but the face wasn't a bear's. There was no snout, just a flat, brutal mask of fury with eyes that glowed with a faint internal red light. And it wasn't standing on 4 legs. It was standing on 5. A 5th leg, thick and brong, protruding from the center of its chest, the massive paw at its end digging a trench in the wet earth as it shifted its weight. A choked sob escaped my lips. My brain simply refused to process what I was seeing. My books, my shows, my meticulously cataloged knowledge, all of it was useless ash in the face of this impossibility. 5 legs, glowing eyes. That wasn't an animal, that was a monster from a story told to frighten children. And as that realization hit me, a new sound cut through the storm. It didn't come from the monster outside. It came from the darkness behind me. Deeper in the cave, a voice, high-pitched and unnervingly calm, echoed off the damp rock. It was as clear as a bell, perfectly articulate, and it spoke a single word. Hillary. My name. Hearing my name in that place, in that perfectly calm, high-pitched voice, broke something in my mind. The storm, the rain, the 5-pod monster at the mouth of the cave, all of it was a physical, understandable threat. But this was different. This was an intelligence. This was personal. This was the Watcher in the woods.
Who's there? My voice was a pathetic, trembling whisper that the damp air seemed to swallow instantly. The voice from the darkness answered without hesitation, its tone light, almost conversational, like a friendly stranger making small talk. Just a friend, Hillary. I've been waiting for you. That thing outside, he's one of mine. A bit messy, I'll admit, but he gets the job done. He's here to keep you safe. With me. My blood ran cold. One of his? The bear wasn't a random monster, it was a guard dog, a hound set to keep the prey cornered. My meticulously chosen shelter wasn't a refuge, it was a pantry. Every single decision I'd made since the rain started, every clever adaptation I thought was a victory for my survival skills, had just herded me deeper into the trap. The feeling of being powerless, the one I'd fled my sterile office life to escape, crashed over me with the force of a physical blow. I was a data point on a spreadsheet again, a variable in someone else's horrifying equation. I scrambled backward, away from the voice, my back hitting the damp cave wall with a thud. My headlamp beam sliced wildly through the darkness, revealing nothing but glistening rock and deep shadow. In front of me, the monstrous bear shifted, its bulk blocking the silvery light of the storm. I was caught. A rock and a hard place didn't begin to describe it. "Don't be afraid," the voice cooed from the blackness. "I know all about you.
I know about the promotion you didn't get. I know about Mark and Dave and that little glass office. I know how small they made you feel. Every word was a precise surgical cut into my deepest insecurities. You came here to feel big, didn't you? To feel in control. I can give you that. Real control, real power. Not like the make-believe power they hand out in boardrooms. Just come a little deeper. We can talk about the terms. My survivalist brain, the last bastion of my old self, screamed at me. It was a lure, the oldest trick in the predator's book. Isolate the prey, disorient it, offer it what it wants most, and then spring the trap. It was trying to get me off balance, to make me walk into the dark. My only chance, the books would say, was the devil I could see. The bear at the entrance took a heavy step forward into the cave, then another. Its red eyes fixed on me, its face illuminated by another flash of lightning, began to shift. The matted fur seemed to retract, pulling back into the flesh as the bone structure beneath it audibly cracked and reformed. The flat, brutish features stretched and contorted. It was becoming something hideously, mockingly human. A caricature of a face, mouth pulled wide in a silent, furious scream. That was it. My mind snapped. I wasn't going to be a victim cowering in the dock. I was a survivor. I saw my chance. A narrow gap, maybe 2 feet wide, between the creature's side and the cave wall. If I was fast, I could slip past it. I took a deep, shuddering breath, my hand closing around the small survival knife at my belt. It was a pathetic weapon against that thing. But it was mine. It was an action. It was control. I ran. I lunged for the gap, screaming a raw, ragged sound of defiance. For a split second, I thought I'd made it. I felt the cold, rain-soaked air on my face, smelled the ozone from the storm. Freedom! Then something slammed into my side with the force of a car crash. It wasn't one of the 4 paws I was watching for. It was the 5th one, the one from its chest, hooking into my ribs with an unnatural, prehensile precision. It lifted me off the ground as if I weighed nothing, my knife clattering uselessly onto the rocks.
I was pinned. The creature slammed me against the cold, wet cave wall, the jagged rack biting into my back. All the air rushed out my lungs in a pained grunt. The pain was blinding, a white-hot explosion in my side, but it was nothing compared to the absolute, soul-crushing terror of my utter helplessness. I was staring into its morphing, impossible face, now just inches from mine. The human-like mask was gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of shadow and those 2 burning red embers. It smelled of wet fur, decay, and cold stone. My knowledge, my planning, my desperate need to prove myself, all of it meant nothing. I was just meat, caught in a trap I'd walked into with a smug sense of accomplishment. My vision began to tunnel, the edges turning gray and fuzzy. The sounds of the storm faded into a dull roar. The only thing I could hear clearly was the high-pitched voice echoing from the darkness one last time. It was no longer soothing or conversational. It was filled with a kind of detached clinical curiosity, the tone of a scientist observing a failed experiment, the tone of my boss telling me I just wasn't a good fit. "You see, Hillary," it said, the words sliding into my fading consciousness like splinters of ice. "You never had control, not in your little office, and certainly not out here. But thank you for playing." The 5th paw squeezed, and I heard my ribs crack like dry twigs. A scream tried to form in my throat, but it came out as a wet gurgle.
The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of pain and darkness. The funny thing about control is that you think it's something you can achieve. I spent my whole life building a fortress against the feeling of being small and insignificant, only to run headfirst into a world where I was, truly and cosmically, nothing. My greatest trauma, the fear of being powerless, was not just a fear. It was a fundamental truth of my existence. I wasn't an analyst, or a survivor, or even a victim. In the end, I was just the entertainment for it. My last coherent thought wasn't of my life, or my family, or anything meaningful. It was the simple, devastating data point that my meticulously constructed fortress was built on a foundation of absolute nothing. Then there was only the thrumming and the dark.
There are more scares to share. Press the like button and subscribe so you don't miss a single terrifying moment. You're helping me investigate the deepest, darkest corners to bring you stories that haunt your dreams.